the church and the legal system, nobody else is doing anything to get the truth out there about the danger that my dad is to children. So it is time for me to say something so I can protect my niece and nephews, and so I can protect any other children involved, because unfortunately my dad is still a practicing dentist in the state of Idaho. And he has, patients that are also children, I'm sure, because he has no restrictions currently on his license. So just so many children at risk. And I thought nobody else is going to speak up about this. So I am. And fortunately, because of the divorce trial, I have been able to get all that documentation out there legally without violating my NDA, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. And it's amazing that you're willing to platform yourself, because it is really tricky. And we'll talk about more of all of the things that have to do with the emotional side in a little bit. So are we good there? Should we move on to your childhood?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So your dad was actually a bishop, and maybe I'll have you explain, because I've done the explaining. Usually I'm the Mormon explainer. So if you want to tell everybody who's not familiar with Mormonism what being a bishop means, also through your perspective as a child, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad got called to be a bishop when I was, I believe, 13 years old. And previous to that, our family had been very active, faithful Mormons. Both of my parents served missions for the LDS Church, full-time service missions for the church when they were younger, in their early 20s. And my dad went to North Carolina. My mom went to Canada. They returned from their missions, met each other through, church stuff. And then they had me. And by 2.5, I actually was showing some weird behaviors that made my mom take me to a therapist. And I was diagnosed at age 2.5 as having been sexually abused. And the therapist talked to both of my parents about it. She said, this girl's definitely been sexually abused. Do you have any idea who it was? And, my mom was like horrified. And my dad, my mom says in hindsight, she can see that he wasn't as maybe shocked or disturbed as he should have been. But he, of course, said, oh, I don't know. And it really didn't occur to my mom that it could be my dad. And then years went on, and there were, in hindsight, a lot of signs and symptoms that are classic symptoms of child sexual abuse that I was exhibiting as I grew up. My mom just, she had no idea that, and she actually was very protective of us. We were, very faithful within the church, and she didn't really want us like spending time at friends' houses too much or spending the night and things like that. She was so protective because she was afraid of me getting abused again, because she knew that someone had abused me when I was younger, but she didn't know it was my dad. So ironically, my mom was super protective of us to try to prevent us from getting sexually abused. But little did she know that the abuser was right under our own roof, and doing things in the middle of the night to me. And so I'm 13 years old, and my dad gets called to be the bishop. That's such a big deal. The bishop is considered a really important leader within the Mormon church over the church congregation. He's, the father of the ward. I think there's like some church song about that. He's the leader of the ward, kind of like a priest, I guess, in other churches, or a pastor in other churches. Very important. Something I'll mention too is that when I was 9 years old, my dad did come to me and take me aside privately, and he started sobbing, and he said, I have to tell you something. When you and I have played in the swimming pool together, because our family at that time had an indoor swimming pool, he said, I've been doing bad things to you. I've been having bad thoughts and touching you badly. And I'm so sorry. I've repented. And I'd never seen my dad crying like that before. I was like shocked. And he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so upset, but I've repented, and I don't want you to tell Mom, because then, she will be upset. And he said, so this is between you and me. And I think that we need to be more careful when we're playing in the pool together.
that we need to be more careful.
Yeah, we need to be more careful so this kind of thing doesn't keep happening. And honestly, I had no idea what he was talking about. Now in hindsight, I can see totally how he was molesting me and using that super physical playtime as an opportunity to be very, to be fondling, he would do this game that was like, oh, you ride on my back and then I ride on your back. And I remember even as a kid thinking, well, it makes sense for me to ride on dad's back because he's the dad, he's big. But why would he ride on my back? Like that's an awkward experience,
Mm-hmm.
So it's all really clear now. But at the time, I didn't understand things about, sexual stuff. And so I just remember thinking, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be being careful about. And I don't know what my responsibility is here. So I think I'm just not going to play with dad in the pool anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to avoid the whole situation. And so I did. But for years after that, what he did was he would come and get in the bed with me in the middle of the night while he was aroused, and I would feel his erect penis on my backside. And he would be like massaging my shoulders and back. And I was uncomfortable, and I was super stiff, like physically. I just remember being kind of stiff and kind of trying to pull away and resist. And he would say, oh, you don't love your daddy. You don't like me, do you? And so I was shamed, I felt ashamed and I felt guilty. And I thought I don't like this, but it's clearly my problem because since my dad had come to me at age 9, about the swimming pool stuff and said he was sorry and everything, I thought, well, whatever he's doing now, even though I don't like it, it must not be bad because when he was doing bad things, he apologized for that and he stopped, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess this is okay, even though it feels kind of gross,
Mm-hmm.
It was just so confusing. After he was called to be bishop, the abuse continued. It actually escalated to where there was an incident that was particularly severe. It happened at a hotel room back east on a field trip that my dad came as a chaperone for, ironically. My brother and I were joining this school group for this charter school that we were attending at the time, like through long distance, because we were actually being homeschooled by then. My brother and I were both struggling in certain ways when we had been in school, which now we look back and realize was because of abuse. There was abuse symptoms and we were struggling because of abuse. But my mom didn't know that. So she's like, well, maybe they will do better if I homeschool. Even though she was really kind of scared to do that and overwhelmed by it, she just was trying to do what was best for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, from about age 8 or 9, I was being homeschooled. And eventually, when I got a little older, we were doing this like long distance charter school thing where they would send the VHS videotapes and we would watch them and do the assignments and send the assignments back to the school in Utah. So anyways, the school went back east on a field trip at a hotel there where my mom wasn't present because ironically, she had not gone on the trip because she was on bed rest to avert a miscarriage from a pregnancy at that time. So it was just my dad that went with us. And yeah, things were worse than ever in this hotel room incident when he got in the bed with me.